Today I married a 22-year-old Emily, my upgrade from my ex-wife Renee here. She was just too dull for me. Greg's voice boomed across the crowded restaurant as he gestured towards me with a smirk. But hey, everyone makes mistakes, right? I froze, the wine glass slipping from my trembling hand as the blood drained from my face. The stunned silence of our table was deafening, broken only by the clattering of silverware and hushed murmurs from nearby diners. Greg's words hung in the air like a thick fog, suffocating me with their audacity. My mind raced back to the beginning, when I had first met Greg at a tech conference. His charm and confidence had been intoxicating, and I fell hard for his smooth talking and promises of a future together. Our courtship was a whirlwind, and before I knew it, we were exchanging vows bound by the sacred ties of marriage. But those ties quickly frayed as Greg's true colors emerged. The man I had fallen for was slowly replaced by a cold, dismissive stranger who seemed to take pleasure in belittling me. I found myself constantly questioning my own worth, walking on eggshells to avoid his scathing remarks. As time passed, the emotional distance between us grew, and I began to suspect that Greg's late nights at the office were more than just long work hours. The lingering scent of unfamiliar perfume on his shirts, the furtive glances at his phone, all signs that I couldn't ignore any longer. With a heavy heart, I started documenting his behavior, carefully collecting evidence of his infidelity. Every missed call, every suspicious text message was meticulously recorded, building a case that would eventually shatter the illusion of our marriage. Greg's words echoed in my mind, a cruel reminder of the depth of his betrayal. But somewhere beneath the anguish, a spark of determination ignited within me. I would not be the victim in this story. It was time to take control and expose the truth, no matter how painful it might be. In the days that followed Greg's humiliating outburst, I found myself retreating into a numb haze, grappling with the harsh reality of his infidelity. Everywhere I turned, reminders of his betrayal taunted me, from the lingering scent of his cologne on our bedsheets to the sickening messages I discovered on his phone. Sarah, my ever-loyal best friend, was a constant source of support during those dark times. "He's a lying snake, Renee," she spat, her eyes blazing with fury. "You deserve so much better than that sorry excuse for a man." Her words resonated deeply, fueling the fire within me. I couldn't let Greg simply discard me like yesterday's trash, not after everything we'd been through. With Sarah's encouragement, I started meticulously compiling evidence. Phone records, credit card statements, anything that could expose his duplicitous ways. Finally, one fateful evening, I decided to confront him head-on. Greg had just returned from one of his late nights at the office, his shirt crumpled and his hair disheveled. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the churning in my gut. He barely acknowledged me, dismissively waving a hand as he headed for the fridge. "Can it wait, Renee? I'm starving." "No, it can't wait." I slammed the folder of evidence onto the counter, startling him. "Look at these, Greg. Look at what I've found." His eyes narrowed as he flipped through the pages, his expression shifting from confusion to realization. "So you've been spying on me? Real classy, Renee." "Don't try to turn this around on me," I snapped. "You're the one who's been lying and cheating. With Emily, no less." A sly grin crept across his face. "Ah, yes, Emily. Now there's a real woman, not some uptight nag like you." The venom in his words stung, but I refused to back down. "How could you do this to us, Greg? To our marriage?" He let out a derisive laugh. "Our marriage? Please, Renee. That ship sailed a long time ago. I want a divorce, and you're not going to stop me from being happy with Emily." In that moment, the final shreds of my love for Greg withered away, replaced by a burning desire for retribution. He thought he could simply cast me aside and ride off into the sunset with his young mistress? Not on my watch. As Greg stormed out of the room, I clutched the folder close, a determined glint in my eye. This was war, and I intended to emerge victorious no matter what it took. With Greg's bitter words still ringing in my ears, I knew I needed to take action. Sitting idly by while he trampled over our marriage vows was not an option. It was time to fight back, and for that, I needed an ally in my corner. Lisa Turner came highly recommended by a friend, a no-nonsense divorce attorney known for her tenacity. Our first meeting left me feeling empowered as she laid out the legal avenues I could pursue. Greg's infidelity gives you grounds for a fault divorce, Lisa explained, her steely gaze fixed on me. And with the evidence you've gathered, we have a strong case for securing a sizable settlement. A weight lifted from my shoulders. Finally, I had a path forward, a way to make Greg pay for his misdeeds. Lisa wasted no time in filing the necessary paperwork, setting the wheels in motion. In the meantime, I continued documenting Greg's exploits, paying close attention to his finances. It didn't take long to uncover a trail of overspending and questionable purchases, expensive jewelry, lavish dinners, all likely ploys to woo his young mistress. One fateful afternoon, as I was restocking our fridge at the local grocery store, a familiar figure caught my eye. There she was, Emily, draped in an ostentatious fur coat that likely cost more than my car. Her saccharine smile turned sickly sweet as she sauntered over. "Well, if it isn't the scorned wife," she cooed, her voice dripping with condescension. "Greg told me all about how you've been making his life miserable." My hands clenched into fists as I fought the urge to lash out. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, Emily. Greg's just using you." She let out a derisive laugh. "Keep telling yourself that, dear. Greg loves me in a way he could never love a frigid shrew like you." Before I could respond, she was gone, leaving a trail of her sickly sweet perfume in her wake. My blood boiled with rage, fueling my determination to take Greg down once and for all. With Lisa's guidance, we crafted a meticulous plan to expose Greg's deceit and ensure I received every penny I was owed. Financial records, witness statements, even private investigators, no stone would be left unturned in our pursuit of justice. As the court date loomed closer, I found myself filled with a sense of purpose. Greg had made the grave mistake of underestimating me, and now he would face the consequences of his actions. I was no longer the meek, downtrodden wife he had taken for granted. I was a woman on a mission, and nothing would stand in my way. With Lisa's guidance, I knew it was time to turn up the heat on Greg. No more playing nice. He needed to feel the full weight of his actions crashing down on him. The first salvo came in the form of a certified letter delivered straight to Greg's office. I couldn't help but smirk at the thought of his colleagues whispering behind his back, speculating about the impending legal drama. True to form, Greg responded with fury when he called me later that evening. "What the hell is this, Renee?" he snarled into the phone. "You have no right to do this." "I have every right," I shot back, my voice steady and unwavering. "You brought this on yourself, Greg. Did you really think you could just discard me like trash and ride off into the sunset with your little mistress?" His silence spoke volumes. For once, the smug, arrogant Greg seemed at a loss for words. From that point on, it was a whirlwind of activity. Lisa and I burned the midnight oil, poring over financial records and gathering every shred of evidence we could find. Witness statements, private investigator reports, even footage from security cameras, nothing was off limits. With each new piece of damning information, I felt a surge of vindication coursing through my veins. Greg had truly underestimated me, and now he would pay the ultimate price. Lisa proved to be a formidable ally, her legal expertise guiding me through the often confusing maze of divorce proceedings. "There are different types of compensation we can pursue," she explained one evening as we strategized over takeout containers. "Alimony, of course, to ensure you maintain your standard of living. But we can also go after a lump sum payment, as well as a portion of Greg's assets and investments." My head spun at the prospect, but Lisa's confidence was contagious. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to envision a future without Greg's shadow looming over me. As the court date drew nearer, the tension was palpable. Greg's lawyers tried every trick in the book, from character assassinations to spurious counter-accusations. But Lisa was a rock, her unwavering resolve a beacon guiding me through the storm. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. I took the stand, my heart pounding in my chest as I recounted the sordid details of Greg's betrayal. His lawyers tried to rattle me, but I stood firm, bolstered by the mountain of evidence we had amassed. When the judge finally rendered his verdict, the weight that had been bearing down on me for months seemed to lift. Greg was ordered to pay a substantial settlement, including alimony and a sizable portion of his assets. As the courtroom cleared, I caught a glimpse of Greg's contorted face, twisted with rage and disbelief. But for once, his tantrum didn't faze me. I had won, and nothing could take that away from me. The weight of the past year seemed to lift from my shoulders as I stepped out of the courthouse, the crisp autumn air filling my lungs. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was free. Free from Greg's grip, free from the turmoil that had consumed my life. As I finalized the divorce paperwork and transferred the settlement funds into my own account, a sense of vindication washed over me. Greg had tried his damnedest to break me, but in the end, I had emerged victorious, with my dignity and self-worth intact. Of course, Greg couldn't let me savor the victory without one last temper tantrum. As I was packing up the last remnants of my life from our once-shared home, he barged in, his face contorted with rage. "You think you've won, don't you?" he spat, looming over me with clenched fists. "Well, this isn't over, Renee. You haven't heard the last of me." I met his gaze with a calm, steady stare. "It's over, Greg. I've moved on, and so should you." Without another word, I brushed past him, leaving him to stew in his own bitterness. In the weeks that followed, I found solace in the simple pleasures I had long neglected. Leisurely walks in the park, catching up on my reading, and reconnecting with old friends. It was as if a weight had been lifted, allowing me to breathe freely for the first time in years. Sarah, ever the supportive friend, insisted on treating me to a much-needed getaway. "You've been through hell and back," she said, wrapping me in a warm embrace. "It's time to treat yourself." And so, with my settlement funds safely tucked away, I booked a solo trip to the coast. A chance to reset and rediscover the woman I had been before Greg's toxicity seeped into my life. The salty sea air and the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore worked their magic, slowly but surely washing away the lingering ache of my shattered marriage. As I strolled along the sand, the sun's warmth caressing my skin, I marveled at the newfound freedom I had fought so hard to reclaim. No longer was I beholden to Greg's whims and moods, walking on eggshells to avoid his wrath. I was my own woman, master of my own destiny, with a world of possibilities stretching out before me. In those quiet moments of solitude, I found myself reflecting on the path that had led me here, the heartache, the betrayal, the grueling battle for justice. And yet, through it all, I had emerged stronger, more resilient, and more fiercely protective of my own worth. As I watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I made a silent vow to myself. Never again would I allow someone else to diminish my light. The future was mine to shape, and I intended to do so on my own terms, without apology or regret. The months following my divorce from Greg ushered in a newfound sense of peace and self-discovery. I threw myself into my work, relishing the freedom to chase my ambitions without the weight of a toxic relationship holding me back. It was at a local charity gala, surrounded by the city's elite, that my hard-earned tranquility was shattered. As I mingled with colleagues and potential investors, a familiar figure caught my eye across the crowded ballroom. Greg, looking every bit the smug philanderer, with Emily draped on his arm like a gaudy accessory. I felt my stomach lurch as they approached, Greg's self-satisfied smirk seeming to grow wider with every step. "Well, well, if it isn't my dear ex-wife," he proclaimed loudly, drawing the attention of nearby guests. "Renee, meet my radiant wife, Emily. We're expecting our little bundle of joy soon. Looks like everything is going right for me." Emily flashed a sickly sweet smile, her hand resting on the swell of her pregnant belly. In that moment, a wave of nausea washed over me, threatening to send the contents of my glass tumbling to the floor. Before I could react, the words spilled from my lips, fueled by a sudden surge of righteous indignation. "Congratulations," I replied, my voice dripping with thinly veiled disdain. "How many men have fathered your supposed bundle of joys, Emily?" The smile melted from Emily's face as she recoiled, her eyes widening in shock. Greg, ever the clueless fool, simply furrowed his brow in confusion. "What the hell are you talking about, Renee?" I leveled my gaze at Emily, unflinching. "You heard me. Or did you think your little secrets would stay buried forever?" With that, I turned on my heel and strode away, leaving Greg sputtering in my wake. The weight of Emily's deceit, the tangled web of lies she had spun, no longer burdened me. In that moment, I felt a sense of liberation, a vindication that transcended the petty drama of my failed marriage. In the days that followed, whispers rippled through the social grapevine, rumors of Emily's sordid past, a trail of broken hearts and shattered lives left in her wake. It seemed that even Greg's wealth and status couldn't shield him from the consequences of his misplaced trust. One evening, as I was unwinding after a long day at the office, my phone rang with an all-too-familiar number. Greg's voice, laced with desperation, crackled through the line. "Renee, we need to talk. Please, just hear me out." I almost pitied him in that moment, a man brought to his knees by his own hubris. But the scars of his betrayal ran too deep, and I had no intention of reopening those wounds. "Greg, it's over," I replied, my voice steady and resolute. "Whatever mess you've found yourself in, you'll have to sort it out on your own." His pleas fell on deaf ears as I ended the call, a newfound sense of closure washing over me. The path ahead was clear, unburdened by the baggage of my failed marriage. In the days and weeks that followed, I watched from afar as Greg's world unraveled. Emily's web of lies lay exposed, and the once charming businessman found himself shunned by the very social circles he had once dominated. As for me, I strode forward with my head held high, reveling in the knowledge that I had emerged from the ashes of my former life stronger, wiser, and utterly vindicated. As I left the charity gala that fateful night, a peculiar sense of satisfaction washed over me. For too long, I had allowed Greg and his scheming mistress to dictate the narrative, to hold the power over my emotions. But in that moment, the tables had turned, and their carefully constructed facade was crumbling before their very eyes. In the days that followed, the whispers grew louder, spreading like wildfire through the social circles Greg and Emily had once dominated. It seemed that Emily's past indiscretions, her trail of broken hearts and shattered lives, had finally caught up with her. Reports trickled in of scorned lovers emerging from the shadows, each with their own sordid tale of Emily's deceit. Fake identities, fabricated pregnancies, entire relationships built on a foundation of lies. It was a twisted web that even Greg, in all his arrogance, couldn't ignore. The once charming businessman found himself increasingly isolated, his friends and colleagues distancing themselves from the unfolding drama. Gone were the days of backslapping camaraderie and exclusive country club memberships. In their place, a deafening silence, punctuated by sidelong glances and hushed whispers. It was during this period of social exile that Greg reached out to me, his voice tinged with desperation. "Renee, please," he implored over the crackling phone line. "You have to help me. Emily, she's not who I thought she was." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh at the irony of his plea. "And you think I owe you anything, Greg, after everything you put me through?" His silence spoke volumes. For once, the smooth-talking charmer was at a loss for words, his silver tongue rendered impotent by the weight of his own hubris. "I'm sorry, Greg," I continued, my voice brimming with a newfound confidence, "but you made your bed a long time ago. Now you get to lie in it." With a decisive click, I ended the call, severing the last remaining tie to my former life. Greg's world was crumbling around him, and I had no intention of getting caught in the rubble. As the weeks wore on, the once powerful couple found themselves increasingly ostracized, their social status reduced to little more than a punchline. Emily's web of lies lay exposed, her carefully curated persona unraveling thread by thread. And Greg, the man who had once so callously discarded me in pursuit of his own selfish desires, was left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. The lavish lifestyle, the adoring social circle, the illusion of power and prestige, all of it had crumbled in the wake of Emily's deception. For my part, I watched the drama unfold from a safe distance, a silent observer to the karmic retribution that had befallen my former tormentors. There was a certain poetic justice in their downfall, a vindication that transcended mere words or actions. As I moved forward with my life, building a thriving career and nurturing healthy relationships, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the trials I had endured. They had forged me into a stronger, more resilient woman, one who would never again allow herself to be diminished by the likes of Greg or Emily. In the end, their twisted games had only served to illuminate my own inner strength, a resilience that had carried me through the darkest of times and into the light of a new, fulfilling chapter. And for that, I would be eternally grateful. 2 years had passed since that fateful encounter with Greg and Emily at the charity gala, 2 years of healing, growth, and hard-earned triumph. As I stood in the sleek, modern office that had become the headquarters of my burgeoning tech startup, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I'd come. What had once been a mere glimmer of an idea, a passion project born out of the ashes of my failed marriage, had now blossomed into a thriving business empire. My innovative software solutions were in high demand, attracting clients from all corners of the globe and securing my financial independence for years to come. Gone were the days of walking on eggshells, of letting Greg's toxic presence dictate my every move. I was the master of my own destiny now, calling the shots and shaping my future with an unwavering determination. As I navigated the bustling office, exchanging friendly banter with my dedicated team of employees, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. This was my legacy, built from the ground up through sheer grit and resilience. Of course, the road to success hadn't been an easy one. There had been countless late nights, nerve-wracking pitches to skeptical investors, and more than a few setbacks along the way. But each obstacle had only served to fuel my determination, reminding me of the depths I had been forced to climb from. In stark contrast to my own ascent, Greg's fortunes had taken a decidedly different turn. Word had trickled down through the grapevine that he was now persona non grata in the business world, his once sterling reputation tarnished beyond repair by the fallout from Emily's deception. Jobless and shunned by his former social circles, Greg had become little more than a cautionary tale, a reminder of the perils of unchecked arrogance and poor judgment. Part of me almost pitied the man, reduced to a mere shadow of his former self. Almost. The truth was, I had long since moved past any lingering bitterness or resentment towards my ex-husband. His actions, while reprehensible, had ultimately served as the catalyst for my own personal revolution, forcing me to shed the shackles of my former meek existence and embrace the strong, self-assured woman I had become. As I stepped out onto the balcony of my corner office, taking in the breathtaking view of the city skyline, I couldn't help but feel a sense of profound gratitude for the winding path that had led me here. The heartache, the betrayal, the grueling battles, they had all been necessary steps on my journey towards true fulfillment. A gentle knock at the door broke me from my reverie, and I turned to find Nathan, my new romantic partner, standing in the doorway with a warm smile. Nathan, with his kind eyes and unwavering support, had been a beacon of light during those darkest days, a reminder that not all men were cut from the same cloth as Greg. "Ready for our dinner reservation?" he asked, his voice laced with affection. I nodded, slipping my hand into his as we made our way out of the office. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was truly, blissfully content. Not just with my professional achievements, but with the person I had become. As we strolled through the city streets, surrounded by the hustle and bustle of urban life, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and optimism for the future. The shadows of my past had been banished, replaced by a newfound appreciation for the present and all the wonders it had to offer. Greg and Emily were mere footnotes in my story now, relics of a chapter best left behind. The path ahead was mine to forge, unencumbered by the weight of past mistakes or regrets. And with each step forward, I felt myself growing stronger, more resilient, and more confident in my ability to conquer whatever obstacles life might throw my way. The rhythmic hum of the tires against the asphalt usually lulled me into a trance, but this time my parents' hushed conversation jolted me awake. Something about their tones made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Once we drop him off, we'll finally be free of this burden," Dad muttered. My heart rate spiked. Were they talking about me? No, it couldn't be. Mom glanced over her shoulder, her eyes meeting mine through the rearview mirror. A fleeting look of discomfort crossed her face before she turned back to Dad. "He'll be fine. We've arranged everything. It's for the best," she said, her voice strained. A knot formed in my stomach as I realized the truth. They were discussing abandoning me, their own son. Memories of their emotional distance and indifference flooded my mind, suddenly making sense. The car fell silent, but the tension was palpable. I wanted to confront them, to demand answers, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I studied their tense expressions, searching for any hint of remorse or hesitation. There was none. As the miles ticked by, my confusion morphed into a simmering anger. How could they do this to their own child? Didn't they care about me at all? When we stopped at a rest area, Dad announced he needed to stretch his legs. Mom followed suit, leaving me alone in the car. I watched them disappear into the building, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and anticipation. Moments later, the engine roared to life and the car jolted forward. Through the rear window, I saw them standing motionless, their faces devoid of emotion, as they watched me being driven away by their own hands. Tears of anger and betrayal stung my eyes as the reality sank in. They had planned this all along. My own parents had abandoned me, casting me aside like an unwanted burden. In that moment, something shifted within me. I would not let them get away with this. I would expose their deceit and reclaim my dignity, no matter what it took. This was not the end, but the beginning of my fight for justice. After what felt like an eternity, the car slowed to a stop. My heart raced as I contemplated my next move. Should I confront the driver? Try to escape? The uncertainty was suffocating. The driver's door opened and a gruff-looking man peered inside. "You Brady?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. I nodded, my mouth dry. He beckoned me to follow him, and we entered a dingy motel room. The pungent smell of cigarette smoke assaulted my nostrils, making me nauseous. "Your folks paid me to bring you here," the man said, tossing a duffel bag onto the bed. "That's all your stuff. They said you'd be fine on your own." My heart sank as the weight of their betrayal crashed over me once again. Abandoned and alone, with nothing but a bag of my belongings. The man left without another word, and I sank onto the bed, burying my face in my hands. Hot tears of anger and despair streamed down my cheeks. How could they do this to me? After what felt like hours, I wiped my eyes and rummaged through the duffel bag, desperate for any clue as to their motives. That's when I found it, a manila envelope tucked away at the bottom. With shaking hands, I tore it open, and my worst fears were confirmed. Legal documents detailing an emancipation petition filed by my own parents seeking to sever all ties with me. They had been planning this for who knows how long, and I had been oblivious. Rage boiled within me as I read through the papers, each line a stinging reminder of their callousness. They claimed I was a financial burden, a hindrance to their lives. Harsh words like unruly and ungrateful jumped off the pages, painting a distorted picture of me that I barely recognized. Tears of anger blurred my vision as I crumpled the papers in my fist. How dare they? After all these years of neglect and emotional absence, they had the audacity to blame me? In that moment, a fire ignited within me, burning away any lingering doubts or attachments. They wanted to be free of me? Fine, but I would not go down without a fight. I would expose their cruelty and deceit, making them face the consequences of their actions. As I formulated a plan, a newfound determination coursed through my veins. I may have been alone, but I was far from helpless. With evidence in hand, I would seek out the one person I knew would have my back. My Aunt Quinlan. Tomorrow, the battle would begin, and this time I would not be the one left behind. The rumble of the truck's engine echoed through the quiet diner as it pulled into the parking lot. I clutched the duffel bag tightly, steeling myself for whatever lay ahead. Aunt Quinlan had agreed to meet me here, my last glimmer of hope in this nightmare. As I entered the diner, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon enveloped me, providing a brief moment of comfort. A kind-eyed woman behind the counter gave me a warm smile. "Can I help you, honey?" she asked. "I'm supposed to meet my aunt here," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Her expression softened. "You must be Brady. Your aunt called ahead. Go have a seat, and I'll bring you something to eat while you wait." I nodded gratefully and slid into a corner booth, my eyes fixed on the entrance, waiting for Aunt Quinlan's familiar face to appear. The diner owner, whose name tag read Tara, brought me a steaming plate of pancakes and a glass of orange juice. "On the house," she said with a wink. "You look like you could use a pick-me-up." I managed a faint smile, overwhelmed by her kindness towards a complete stranger. As I picked at the pancakes, my mind drifted back to the betrayal that had brought me here. The anger and hurt threatened to consume me, but I pushed it down, focusing on the task at hand. An hour ticked by, then 2, and still no sign of Aunt Quinlan. Doubt crept in, whispering that perhaps she wouldn't show up either. Maybe everyone was content to abandon me. Just as I was about to give up hope, the bell above the diner's door jingled, and a frazzled-looking Quinlan rushed in. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on me, and she hurried over, enveloping me in a tight embrace. "Brady, thank God you're all right," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I came as soon as I could." She pulled back, holding me at arm's length, her gaze searching mine. "Tell me everything that happened." And so I did, recounting every agonizing detail: the overheard conversation, the abandonment, the legal papers. With each word, Quinlan's expression grew darker. Her jaw clenched in fury. "Those bastards," she spat when I finished, her hands balled into fists. How could they do this to their own son? Tara, who had been hovering nearby, placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "You're safe now, sweetie. We won't let them get away with this." Quinlan nodded, her eyes blazing with determination. "They'll pay for what they've done, I promise you that. We'll take them to court, expose their lies, and make sure they face the consequences." Relief washed over me, knowing that I wasn't alone in this fight. With Aunt Quinlan and Tara on my side, I felt a renewed sense of strength. My parents had made a grave mistake in underestimating me. As we gathered our things to leave, Tara pulled me aside. "You take care of yourself, you hear?" she said, pressing a folded napkin into my hand. "And if you ever need a safe place, you come back here." I pocketed the napkin, grateful for her kindness, and followed Quinlan out to her car. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope. My parents had thrown me away, but I had found allies who would fight for me no matter what. And in that moment, I knew the battle had just begun. Aunt Quinlan's modest apartment became our base of operations in the days that followed. As soon as we arrived, she sprang into action, making a flurry of phone calls and scouring the internet for resources. "We need to build an airtight case," she declared, her laptop open on the kitchen table. "Those scumbags won't know what hit them." I watched in awe as she navigated the legal maze with practiced ease, jotting down notes and cross-referencing information. It was almost as if she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. "First things first," she said, fixing me with a determined stare. "We need to gather every shred of evidence we can find. Documents, emails, recordings, anything that proves their intent to abandon you." I nodded, recalling the crumpled papers I had stashed in my duffel bag. Quinlan's eyes lit up as I produced them, and she immediately set to work cataloging and organizing the damning evidence. Over the next few days, we pored over the materials, strategizing our approach and anticipating potential counter-arguments from my parents' legal team. Quinlan was relentless, leaving no stone unturned in her quest for justice. "They won't be able to wriggle their way out of this," she assured me, her voice brimming with confidence. "We'll make sure of it." One afternoon, as we were sifting through a stack of old emails, Quinlan let out a triumphant exclamation. "Jackpot!" She brandished a printout, her eyes gleaming. "These emails prove that your parents were planning this for months, maybe even years. They've been squirreling away money, hiding assets, all to ensure they could ditch you and live the high life." My stomach churned as the full weight of their betrayal sank in. They had been methodically plotting to discard me, like I was nothing more than a burdensome inconvenience. Quinlan must have sensed my turmoil because she reached across the table and gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "We've got them now, Brady. They won't be able to deny or justify any of this." Her words ignited a newfound determination within me. For too long I had been the victim, powerless and cast aside. But no longer. With Quinlan's guidance, I was arming myself with the tools to fight back, to reclaim my dignity and hold my parents accountable for their despicable actions. Over the next few weeks, we assembled a formidable arsenal, a meticulously organized dossier brimming with irrefutable evidence, a list of potential witnesses and character references, and a game plan for navigating the legal system. "We're ready," Quinlan declared one evening, her eyes blazing with conviction. "It's time to take the fight to them." As I nodded in agreement, a sense of calm washed over me. The road ahead would be arduous, but I was no longer the frightened, abandoned child I had been weeks earlier. With Quinlan by my side, I was a warrior, prepared to battle for justice and make my parents answer for their sins. They had made the grave mistake of underestimating me, and now, They would face the consequences of their cruelty. The gloves were off, and I was ready for war. As our legal battle heated up, Aunt Quinlan's determination only intensified. She was like a woman possessed, leaving no stone unturned in her quest for justice. "We need to hit them from every angle," she declared one evening, her laptop illuminating her fierce expression. "They can't be allowed to wriggle out of this." I watched in awe as she meticulously scoured through financial records, legal documents, and even old home videos, searching for any shred of evidence that could bolster our case. "Look at this," she said, beckoning me over to the computer. On the screen was a grainy video clip from my childhood, a birthday party if the balloons and cake were any indication. At first I didn't understand the significance, but then Quinlan hit play and the sickening truth became clear. There, in the background, my parents sat together on the couch, their expressions cold and disinterested as the younger version of myself blew out the candles. No smiles, no encouragement, just a callous indifference that made my heart clench. "This is proof of emotional neglect," Quinlan said, her voice thick with anger. "We can use it to show a pattern of behavior, a premeditated disregard for your well-being." As we combed through more footage, the evidence mounted. Missed school events, dismissive comments, and even instances where they outright ignored or belittled me. It was a harrowing reminder of the emotional void that had been my childhood. But Quinlan wasn't done yet. She dug deeper, uncovering financial records that painted an even more damning picture. "They've been siphoning money into offshore accounts for years," she revealed, her brow furrowed in disgust, "all while neglecting to provide you with even the most basic necessities." The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. Not only had they emotionally abandoned me, but they had also deprived me of material support, all to fuel their own selfish desires. As the days wore on, the magnitude of their betrayal grew more staggering with each new discovery. Quinlan remained relentless, her determination to expose their depravity fueling her every move. "They won't be able to buy their way out of this," she vowed, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. "We're going to make sure they face the full consequences of their actions, both legally and in the court of public opinion." And so, armed with a mountain of damning evidence, we prepared for the showdown. My parents, once untouchable in my eyes, would soon be brought to their knees, forced to answer for their crimes against their own flesh and blood. As the date of the court hearing loomed closer, a sense of vindication washed over me. For too long I had been the victim, cowering in their shadow. But no more. With Quinlan by my side, I was a force to be reckoned with, a warrior ready to unleash the full weight of justice upon those who had so grievously wronged me. The battle lines were drawn, and there would be no mercy, no quarter given. My parents had made a grave mistake in underestimating me, and now they would pay the ultimate price. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Quinlan gripped my hand tightly as we took our seats, her steely gaze fixed on the empty chairs where my parents would soon be sitting. "Stay strong," she whispered. "We've got this." Moments later, the doors swung open, and my parents strode in, flanked by their high-priced legal team. Their arrogant expressions said it all. They believed they were untouchable, that money and power would shield them from consequences. But as our eyes met, I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross their faces. Gone was the scared, helpless child they had abandoned. In my eyes, they saw a warrior, armed with the truth and a thirst for justice that would not be denied. The judge called the proceedings to order, and Quinlan wasted no time in launching our offensive. With surgical precision, she laid out the damning evidence, the emancipation papers, the financial records, the home videos, each piece painting a vivid picture of their depravity. "These so-called parents have shown a pattern of callous disregard for their own child's well-being," she declared, her voice ringing out with conviction. "They have subjected him to years of emotional and financial neglect, all while scheming to abandon him like discarded trash." My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but I held their gaze, unflinching. This was their reckoning, and they would bear witness to the full weight of their sins. As the evidence mounted, their composed facades began to crack. Quinlan was relentless, hammering them with fact after fact, leaving no room for denial or excuses. These documents prove they've been stashing money away for years, depriving their own son of basic necessities, she said, brandishing the financial records, all to fund their selfish desires and ultimate plan to cast him aside. My father's face flushed red with anger, but I met his glare with a defiant stare. No longer would I cower before his intimidation tactics. Finally, it was my turn to take the stand. With trembling hands, I recounted the agonizing details of their betrayal, the overheard conversation, the abandonment, the crushing realization of their true intentions. They left me stranded like a piece of unwanted garbage, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Their own child, tossed aside without a second thought. Tears streamed down my mother's face, but I felt no sympathy. These were crocodile tears, a desperate attempt to salvage what little shred of humanity they had left. As I stepped down from the stand, I caught Quinlan's proud smile. She gave me a subtle nod, a silent affirmation that I had done well. In the end, the judge's verdict was swift and decisive. The emancipation petition was denied, and an investigation into potential criminal charges was ordered. My parents were ordered to pay restitution and undergo mandatory counseling, but their true punishment went far beyond the legal ramifications. As we left the courthouse, a throng of reporters and onlookers greeted us, showering me with support and condemning my parents' heinous actions. In that moment, I realized that true justice had been served. My parents' reputations were in tatters, their selfish desires exposed for all to see. They had been brought to their knees, forced to answer for their cruelty and callousness. As Quinlan ushered me into the waiting car, I caught one final glimpse of my parents. Broken, disgraced, and utterly defeated, and in that moment I felt a sense of catharsis wash over me. The battle was won, and I had emerged victorious. They had underestimated me, and now they had paid the ultimate price. The aftermath of the courtroom battle was both exhilarating and overwhelming. As Quinlan and I stepped out into the swarm of reporters and supporters, the weight of our victory hit me like a tidal wave. "Brady, Brady! Over here!" The reporters clamored, thrusting microphones and cameras in my face. Quinlan wrapped a protective arm around my shoulders, shielding me from the chaos. "Give the kid some space," she barked, her tone leaving no room for argument. As we pushed through the crowd, snippets of their questions reached my ears. "How does it feel to finally get justice? What would you say to your parents now? Are you worried about potential retaliation?" I remained silent, letting Quinlan take the lead as she expertly navigated us to the safety of her car. It was only when the door slammed shut, muffling the frenzy outside, that I finally let out the breath I had been holding. "You did it, kid," Quinlan said, her eyes shining with pride. "You took those bastards down in spectacular fashion." A grin spread across my face as the reality sank in. We had won, not just in the legal sense, but in the court of public opinion as well. My parents' reputations were in tatters, their misdeeds laid bare for all to see. "I couldn't have done it without you," I said, gripping her hand tightly. "Thank you for never giving up on me." Quinlan scoffed, waving off my gratitude. "Don't mention it. Those lowlifes had it coming. Now we just need to make sure they face the full consequences of their actions." Over the next few days, the saga of my parents' betrayal became a national spectacle. News outlets clamored for interviews, and social media buzzed with outrage and support for my cause. Quinlan fielded the requests with a shrewd eye, carefully curating our narrative and leveraging the public outcry to our advantage. "We need to keep the pressure on," she said, poring over the latest headlines. "The more exposure this gets, the harder it will be for them to wriggle out of facing real consequences." And so we rode the wave of public fury, granting strategic interviews and releasing carefully curated evidence that further damned my parents' actions. Their reputations were in free fall, and I reveled in their downward spiral. But even as the world rallied behind me, a part of me couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. These were the people who had brought me into this world, the ones who were supposed to love and nurture me unconditionally. And yet they had chosen to discard me like worthless trash. Quinlan, ever perceptive, sensed my inner turmoil. "It's okay to feel conflicted, Brady," she said gently. "What they did was unforgivable, but they're still your parents." I nodded, blinking back tears. I just never thought they were capable of something so cruel. Wrapping me in a fierce hug, Quinlan vowed, "They'll get what's coming to them, I promise. And when the dust settles, you'll be able to move on and build the life you deserve, one filled with love and support." As I clung to her, drawing strength from her unwavering presence, I knew she was right. The road ahead would be long, but I had already taken the first steps toward healing and reclaiming my power. My parents had made a grave mistake in underestimating me, and now, as their world crumbled around them, I would rise from the ashes, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The days following the courtroom battle were a whirlwind of change. As the dust settled, the true extent of my parents' downfall became evident. "They're facing criminal charges," Quinlan announced one morning, her eyes alight with vindication. "Abandonment, child neglect, financial fraud, the whole 9 yards. I nodded solemnly, a mixture of relief and lingering sadness washing over me. As much as I despised their actions, a part of me still yearned for the parents I had once known, the ones who were supposed to love and protect me. But Quinlan's voice snapped me back to reality. "And that's not all. The court has ordered them to pay restitution, along with mandatory counseling and community service." A grim satisfaction coursed through me at the thought of my parents being forced to atone for their sins. They had brought this reckoning upon themselves, and now they would face the full weight of their consequences. As the legal proceedings unfolded, Quinlan wasted no time in solidifying my newfound independence. With her guidance, I navigated the emancipation process, officially severing my legal ties to my parents. "From now on, you're in charge of your own life," she said, her voice brimming with pride as we signed the final paperwork. It was a surreal moment, equal parts exhilarating and daunting. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. Free from the shackles of their control, free to forge my own path without their toxic influence. In the weeks that followed, I settled into a new routine, one that finally felt like a true fresh start. Quinlan's modest apartment became my home, a safe haven filled with warmth and support. "Family now, kid," she said, ruffling my hair affectionately. And family sticks together no matter what. With her unwavering guidance, I began to piece my life back together. We enrolled me in a new school, one with a supportive environment and resources to help me catch up on the education I had missed. "You're a smart kid," Quinlan assured me. "You'll be back on track in no time." And true to her word, I thrived in my new academic setting. The weight of my parents' oppressive expectations had been lifted, replaced by a newfound passion for learning and personal growth. Quinlan also encouraged me to seek counseling, recognizing the deep emotional wounds that needed healing. At first I was hesitant, but her gentle nudging and unwavering support eventually convinced me to take that important step. As the weeks turned into months, I began to see the transformation within myself. The anger and bitterness that had once consumed me gradually gave way to a sense of peace and self-acceptance. "You've come a long way, Brady," Quinlan remarked one evening as we shared a homemade meal. "I'm proud of the person you're becoming." Her words filled me with a warmth I had rarely experienced before. The unconditional love and support of a true family. It was a stark contrast to the emotional void I had endured with my parents, and it fueled my determination to continue growing and thriving. As I looked towards the future, I felt a sense of excitement and possibility. The road ahead was uncharted, but for the first time in my life, I was the one holding the map. My parents' betrayal had once threatened to break me, but instead it had forged me into a stronger, more resilient version of myself. And as I embraced the love and guidance of my newfound family, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, armed with the knowledge that I was worthy, capable, and truly loved.